So I guess we'll start. It's already 1 o'clock. The purpose of the share is to try and give some kind of insight into the חידש, into the derech halimud, if you will, of the Rebbe Maharash in Chassidus. And I made a handout which everyone can follow along. I put it in the chat. It's on the website as well. And we'll begin with Pesachim B'Dvar Malchus. As always, source 1 is it's from a Sikha Yud Gimel Tishri Tavshin Lametes, Sikha Daled, where the Rebbe connects the derech of the Rebbe Maharash and Chassidus to the famous Piskam of Milchachila Rebbe. Die Anhoge von Milchachila Rebbe, Lamayla Medida Vagbala, hat man gesehen beim Rebbe Maharash, ich bin gegessen die Mamori Chassidus Shalai. Was die Mamori Chassidus ist der erste Ingen für jeden Nasi Chabad Megele Chassidim Shalai. The conduct of Milchachila Rebbe, of always going over instead of under or around, but being bold and going straight forward, up and over, in a manner of going beyond measure or limitation, is something that we see with the Rebbe Maharash also with regard to his Mamorim. And the Rebbe here adds that the Mamorim are the first point of contact, the first point of connection of every Rebbe to his Chassidim, Chassidi Chabad, and then through them, L'chol ha'olam kolai. As seine Mamorim seien in Arneifim, was die Echos is shaloi be'erech l'gabi dikamas. We find that his Mamorim are in such a manner, the form of the Mamorim is such that the quality or the content is not in accord, is not measurable, is not coordinated with the measure of the amount. In other words, Mamorim themselves are relatively short, and also the style in which the Rebbe Maharash expresses himself and explains himself is coarse, it's short, it's succinct, and yet within that succinct short Mamorim and short modes of expression, brief, sharp modes of expression, the quality is beyond any measure, and the content and the quality. Und wie man findet Taka in die Mamorim von dem Rebbe Nishmasse, den Neumal Mekoyim von dem Rebbe Maharash, als ist Mevara Meirach Hamaz Berashura von Amayim von dem Rebbe Maharash, und davon kommt Arois und Arichs Gedela. We see that the Mamorim of the Rebbe Rashab, he explains one line from Amayim of the Rebbe Maharash, and this explanation becomes a very lengthy elaboration, and this is something that we're going to see in this share. Hopefully, we'll look at some examples that will allow us to see this notion of ma'at hakamas v'rav ha'echos. Even though the Rebbe Maharash speaks with great brevity, with succinct brevity, on the other hand, we see that the content is very great, and to the point that the connection, and this is an interesting point we won't really be able to explore very much here, but the connection between the Rebbe Maharash and the Rebbe Rashab, which the Rebbe is alluding to over here, is such that the things that are very barichas, and you could say even things like the whole Samach Vav, and even in Yanim and Ayin Beis, and certain sugyas that the Rebbe Rashab was Oisikin for many, many years, and went back to again and again, and explained very, very barichas. We see the seeds are planted in a few lines and a few short, bold expressions of the Rebbe Maharash. And hopefully we'll see at least a little bit of that. Okay, so now to continue with this Hagdama about the style of the Rebbe Maharash, the form of his Mamorim, we'll take a look at an article from Harav Shmuel Zalmanov, which was printed in Kibbutz Lubavitch. And here too, he expresses this idea of ma'at hakamas v'rav ha'echos. It's a little more barichas than in the Rebbe Sikha, and there's also a few more details. It's very geschmack piece. So we'll just read through it quickly. I'm going to try now and share my screen so that people can see where I am. I don't know if people can see my screen now. And that way I can highlight where I'm up to, a point with my pointer, and people know where I'm up to. Okay, so die meisten Mamorim von Rebbe Maharash and Shmaseidan geschrieben in a klare, reine Sprach. Most of the Mamorim of the Rebbe Maharash were written in a clear, clean language. Zayn lefi erech nikin gresa, they're not long Mamorim, or nikin shvera, and generally they're not difficult Mamorim. Und zayn darüber zugänglich für alle jede Torah. Therefore they are approachable for all who are knowledgeable in Torah. I feel even those who do not have a broad knowledge in Chabad Sfarim. Gam zwischen Rebbe Maharash Chassidus sein Gewinn, azach größe Goyim Maskilim und Oivdim in Chassidus, Avid Seshem, wie Rav Agon Rav David Hershchein, Haradat Shmaseidan, Chernigoverov, Rav Agon Rav Yaakov Mordechai Bezapolov, Harim, Patovarov, and so on. So even though there were many great Chassidim of the Rebbe Maharash, who Maskilim, who had a very deep understanding of Chassidus, thought very deeply about Chassidus, and he has a list over here of some of the famous Chassidim of the Rebbe Maharash. We'll skip. Nevertheless, and he says, so these Chassidim pflegen Seelen, jeden Wort von der Rebbe. They would count every word of the Rebbe Maharash, und schon lang sich misverkehr sein und dingen sich über Achos v'yater in Rebbe Maharash Teres. They would spend a lot of time debating the meaning, the significance of something that was missing in the Rebbe Maharash Torah or something that was added in the Rebbe Maharash Torah. As we're going to see, this is alluding to the fact that oftentimes the Rebbe Maharash uses Mamorim from other Rabbeim. Somebody just came on and needs to mute themselves. So they would. So the Rebbe Maharash would oftentimes quote or use sections of text from Mamorim of either his father, the Samach Tzedek, or the Mitzvah Rebbe, or the Alter Rebbe, sometimes pieces from Tanya. But he would not just use verbatim the exact text. He was using that as the basis, but there would be a chas v'yater. He would sometimes erase certain things, cut out certain pieces, and sometimes add elaboration, or just a line or a few words. And so the Gedolei Chassidim, they would debate the significance of these subtractions and additions, these changes that the Rebbe Maharash made in his Mamorim, were subject to great interest. They were given great significance by the Gedolei Chassidim, like Radatz and Rabbi Yaakov Mordechai Bezapolov and so on. And however, seinen Abend beim Rebbe Maharash gewähnt viel Tausend Chassidim, azay gerufene Balabatim. There were also many thousands of Chassidim who were so-called Balabatim. In other words, they were more simple Chassidim, not great intellectuals who were necessarily familiar and were able to detect these changes, these Bechas v'Yata. But seine gewähnt durchgenommen durch und durch mit dem chassidischen Geist. They were nevertheless permeated by the spirit of Chassidus and zugebunden zu der Rebbe mit Hiskashrus Atzmi, bound to the Rebbe with a essential Hiskashrus, and sie fleckt das der Rebbe Maharash sagen seine Mamorim in a leichteren lefi erech form. And for them, the Rebbe Maharash would say his Mamorim in a lighter form, relatively speaking. Ma'at hakamas v'rav ha'echos. Here again, you have this idea of ma'at hakamas v'rav ha'echos. The Mamorim are brief. There's questions at the beginning, there's the questions are answered, and usually it's a matter of a few pages, 4 or 5 pages, not long pages, not like the Rebbe Rashat Mamorim where you have a whole arichas, every nakuda is elaborated at great length. In the Rebbe Maharash Mamorim, everything is very brief, very succinct. Für die tiefste Sagas und älteste Haskalah sind Reisgesagt geworden bekitzedik und mit lernendig Beschittchias als sehr verstandliche Sprache. And so the deepest ideas the most subtle concepts were expressed very succinctly, and if you would learn only in a superficial manner, they are seen to be very easily understood. So here you have this is a very good introduction, and hopefully we'll see this brought out in the examples below. One more source to bring out this idea about the style and the form of the Rebbe Marash Mamorim is a letter from the Rebbe Rashab, which he wrote in Tafresh Lamed Ches, Tevis Tafresh Lamed Ches, is source 3 on the handout, and he wrote it while the Rebbe Marash was in the middle of the famous Hemshech Hagodel, V'Kocha Hagodel, in which we're going to see, you see many of the Chidushim of the Rebbe Marash are expressed in this Hemshech in a way that you could say is a good window. It's a good example of his derech b'chlal, and it's known. I heard this from Ramil Svibel, that he heard from Rashag that before Samach Vav, V'Kocha was descends to Hemshech. So it's an elegant Hemshech. It's a Hemshech that has a beginning, middle, and an end. It's a very verstandliche Hemshech. It's very easy to understand, to see where the Rebbe Marash is going, what Mahalach HaMachshava is, and it's also very geschmacka Hemshech. And unlike Samach Vav, which is very long, it's short, relatively speaking. It's 44 mamorim, but they're short mamorim, and so therefore it's much easier to, if you want to set yourself a goal, learning a Hemshech V'Kocha is a good place to start. Okay, so now this is what the Rebbe Rashab says about the Hemshech V'Kocha. He says, it's taksavim mipesach ad gemira. With regard to the ksavim, meaning the ksavim, the mamorim, the kshibna chsidus from Pesach, the Pesach ha'avar hischachak ha'amor shlita ma'im v'kocha tiachla esay v'lei nigmar adata. The Rebbe, my father, the Rebbe Marash, began this maima v'kocha, and it's not yet finished. This is Tevis Tafresh Lamed Ches, right? So it's already more than 6 months later. It would soon be finished. It wasn't much longer, but it's towards the end. It has 129 sifim. We don't know yet how long it will be. It may take a lot longer. Okay. It's also a maimah that's very deep with Kabbalah, a lot of Kabbalah in Yonim, from beginning to end. It's very deep. Who can find its depth? And also the language is very succinct. So again, you have this idea of amok, it's machzik maruba. Kamas is very great. The echos is very great, but the kamas, the lashon, is bekitz and nimratz. Okay, so that's enough for the sake of Hagdama. And we'll just finish with one more word from the Rebbe in source 4. יש להוסיף שהנהגה של המים מסיידה מספתס גם בחידוש של אדמו מרש באמירס תרסי באופן של המשך עניין אחד ארוך שנה במשך רבי שבועות. Similarly, the Rebbe says a similar word, that this is החידוש המיוחד בתרסי. The unique חידוש, maybe the most obvious חידוש you could say, of the Rebbe Marash is that instead of just saying individual mamorim or saying a maimah with a beer after it, or writing Sfarim, he said Mamorim and a Hemshach, where one Maimar, one Inyan would continue. And those who just came on, please mute themselves.
You have to do sign-in option.
So one Inyan cannot be contained within a single Maimar, but rather it spills over into the next maimah. So these are short mamorim which cannot even contain the fullness that they are meant to express, and they spill over into one maimah, and then into another maimah, and then into another maimah. And this is again a bitay of the kaiser, the ma'at hakamas v'rav echos. The Rebbe Marash expressed so succinctly, but with a quality and content that exceeded the boundaries of that limitation of that succinct expression. Okay, so now let's take a look at some examples. I have 3 sections over here going forward, 4 sections. The first is an example of chas v'yate b'biyah mahusa chachma. An example of how the Rebbe Marash takes a maimah or a section from a maimah of the Mittler Rebbe. We're explaining the inyan of chachma, the mahusa chachma, and he adds to the text and cuts from the text, and it transforms the meaning in a subtle way, but in a deep way, so that you come out with a much more crystallized concept of chachma, and in a way, a very different kind of concept of chachma. So, as a hakdama, to kind of ground ourselves and see the way chachma is usually understood, let's take a look at a passage from the Likutei Amorim Tanya Perek Yudches, which you could say maybe this is one of the classical places where the Alter Rebbe defines chachma. There's also a famous Haggadah in Tanya Perek Lamed Hey, which is a vot. And he says, chachma is the source of intellect and understanding. It transcends understanding. Chachma, it's called koyachma. It's the capacity for that which will come. At least that's one way to translate koyachma. It's that which is not yet understood. It's not grasped, and it's not grasped in understanding it yet. And therefore, because it transcends the hagbala of understanding, therefore, therefore, in chachma is vested, is revealed, in sof baruch hu, the gilui of the Eibishter, of the infinite, the less machshav tefisa beklal, which no thought can grasp. Stafka in chachma is grasped and is niskala in sof. So the conventional way of understanding chachma, and the conventional way of understanding this vart in Tanya, is that, as the Lashon is said often in Chassidus, is that chachma is reishis hagilui. It's the beginning of revelation. The beginning of revelation in Seder Shtalshlos. But the key word is gilui. And similarly here, the Lashon of Tanya is oir. Usually we understand chachma as an inyan of oir. That is, it's an external expression of the Eibishter, but because it's the highest expression, it's the beginning of all gilui of the Eibishter. Therefore, it's in an oifen that is l'mayla ma'agbala, and in an oifen that we can have in some way a gilui of itself. And so the way it's usually understood is that this is for gilui. It's not that there's no gilui over here. It's not that this is a thing that in itself cannot be niskala. In itself is the skala. That's the usual havana. In itself is the skala in chachma. Now let's look at the next source. So now what I've done over here is on the handout I have on the right hand side 6a is the Mittler Rebbe's lashon from Teres Chaim Pekudei Daf Taf Non Gimel Amud Daled, and then 6b is the lashon of the Rebbe Marash in Hemshech Lakacha Eitz Chaf Gimel, and it's the additions. What the Rebbe Marash adds, I've underlined, and what he cuts out, I've put a strike through. Okay, so you can see very clearly how the Yesod is the lashon of the Mittler Rebbe, but when we read them side by side, we'll see that a very different maskana we arrive at a different perception of chachma depending on which of these texts we read. If we read let's first read the Mittler Rebbe. In Eksiva chachma yayin temotza, it says chachma comes from ayin. Yayin yesh temotza, it comes from ayin and becomes yesh. Kiyudua da chachma nikaresh tagilei, as is known, the chachma is called the beginning of gilui, the beginning of revelation. And what's it megala? It's megala oir. It's megala something that is revelatory, behishtalshlos, in the order of creation, in the cosmos, in Atzilus. Higher than chachma, there's nothing revealed at all. Chachma is in a manner of a single point. the Yud Shem Avaya, Shvu Besavas Ha'er, the Chochma, Bebechinas Helam, Vayin the Ketzer Shnikra, Ilas Ilas Cholo, Bebechinas Nakoda, the Yud, the Dayan, Gam Hu Lamaylam and Espashtas. So it's still, here he's giving a yachas to Chochma that it's similar to Keser, but in what manner? It's similar to Keser in the manner that it is still only an Akudah. It still hasn't expressed itself fully, it hasn't extended the revelation in a manner of Hasaga, V'tfisa de Bina. So here what emerges is that Chochma is an intermediate point between Keser and Bina. You have Keser, where there's no Giloi, it's Ayin Mamish, you could say. Then you have Chochma, which is already the beginning of Hiskalas, an Akudah of Hiskalas, a point of Hiskalas, but it's not yet expressed itself fully and revealed itself in a manner that can be grasped. Kamoi, Mayan Hanaveh Mina Helam. Chochma is like the wellspring that flows from concealment to revelation. So Chochma is already the flow. It's the beginning of the flow out of Keser. Tipin levad, drop by drop. And since Chochma comes at least with a degree of revelation from concealment, therefore it's called the beginning of revelation. And Chochma is that which then extends to become a yesh gomer, a fully substantive concept, b'hasaga v'tfisa mamish, that can fully be grasped. Okay, let's stop over there. And to summarize, what comes out from the Mitzvah Rebbe is there's no shverikaitan. Everything is very clear. You have Keser, you have a nice order, Keser, Chochma emerges from Keser and becomes Bina. When we read the Reb Marash, his additions change this into a problematic concept. He turns it into a question. And just to highlight one vart, Sarach Lahaven, right? In the middle of it, there's a Sarach Lahaven. In the Mitzvah Rebbe, there's no Sarach Lahaven. There's nothing shver. Everything is explained very easily. But the Reb Marash makes it more complicated. And by making it more complicated, he gives us we end up with a deeper concept of Chochma and also a slightly different concept of Chochma. A subtle difference, but an important difference. Okay, so Hinik Siv, now reading the Reb Marash, V'chochma yayin temot, Tzepirish, ayin nikra ma she'ena musaklal. So he explains what is ayin. Ayin is that which cannot be grasped at all. It's not just lamayla me hasagas habina. It's lamayla me hasagas habina. It's far transcendent, far beyond bina. In Chochma, in the ayin, is the skala, the Ein Sof, which no thought can grasp it at all. So here, right away, the Reb Marash is already associating Chochma not with the Yeshiv Bina, but only with the ayin. It's not that Chochma comes from the ayin. The way he's explaining it, and he makes it more explicit later, is that the Chochma itself is the ayin. It's not that it emerges from the ayin. The Chochma in which Shemiskala Bechinas and Isab Baruchu, Adles Makshavet Vesbeklau, which this is the Lashon from Tanya, right? So in Chochma is the Skala Bechinas in itself, is ayin, which no thought can grasp at all. There's no grasp or understanding of Chochma. We need to understand, if it's not possible to have any benefit, to have any hana, to experience what Chochma is, what is the effect of the gilei? In other words, what kind of gilei is this? You're being megala something that can't come by skalas. That's not a nefin of tfisa. So is it really gilei? V'gam sarach lahaven haloi hachachma nekareishas hagilei. No saying in who shabba b'derech gilei lahanis by. When you say that chachma is reishas hagilei, the significance of that, the meaning of that is that it comes in a manner of revelation, something that is revealed that you can do something with, you can understand it, you can grasp it. There's something that you can untap it. L'mayla min ha'chochma dayin ein gilui b'tzias klal. Higher than chochma, there's no revelation at all. Chochma reish zagili v'hainu b'chinas nekuda the yud the shem havaya shbu l'mayla min b'chinas hispashas v'asog b'tzias debina. And so here he goes back to the lashon of the Reb Marash and continues to explain that it's the beginning of Gilui. But in the Hemshech, again, you see the certain diukim, certain additions, and certain changes, which again give us a different concept. So, for example, we skip down to here. He says, "In Kena Yud Shaboin Nivra Elam Haba Hu Ayin Adai." The Yud of Chachma, with which Elam Haba is created, is still Ayin. Right. So this is a hisafa that's not in the Reb Marash, and it emphasizes that Chachma is still Ayin, as opposed to in the Reb Marash, in the Mitra Rebbe, where Chachma is an intermediate point between Ayin and Yesh. The Reb Marash makes it very clear that Chachma is still Shaykh to Ayin. And Olam Haba is Nivra Mibechinas Ayin, the Yud. Olam Haba, which is Bina, Yesh, the Yesh Bina, comes from the Ayin of the Yud of Chachma, and then from there comes Yesh Vasaga. So without going more into the details over here, just the point that I want to bring out from here is that whereas with the Mitra Rebbe, you have a very neat hierarchy going from the Ayin of Keser to the beginning of Hiskalas, the intermediate point of Chachma, which is the beginning of Hiskalas, which then becomes the Yesh Bina, the Reb Marash makes it very clear. Number one, he makes the whole idea problematic. What does it mean that there's a Gilui of Ayin? And the truth is, this is one of the main inyanim in Hemshech V'Kacha, which he explains in the Mamorim, which come after this Maimar, very barichas, although again in the same style as we see throughout V'Kacha, the language is very succinct. The Mamorim are short, but for several Mamorim, or you could say in a way this is one of the main themes of V'Kacha, he explains this, what is Chachma? And here he sets up the problem in a very clear way, that Chachma is still Ayin. And if so, we need to understand, what does it mean that Ayin comes b'Hiskalas? And what does it mean that the Ayin is Reish Tzagila if it's in an Eifon of Eina Nitin Lahanis, where you can't, it's not given to be experienced, to be enjoyed, to be understood. And so in what way is it a Gilui? And without getting into all the details, we'll just say that if we look at the next two pieces on the next page, is a way of kind of wrapping up this nakuda about Chachma. What is the mahus of Chachma, without getting caught up in the whole sugya too much? It says Chachma. This piece actually is still in the same Maimar, which as the previous piece, and this is also an addition to the Maimar, one sentence basically in the middle of the lashon of the Mitra Rebbe, which gives you a crystallization, a clarity in the mahus of Chachma. The mahus of Chachma has two components. There's the etzem Chachma, and there's the hispashtus of Chachma. V'zein Chachma koyach ma, shebechinas koyach Chachma. Chachma has two components. It has koyach and ma. Koyach to Chachma zein hispashtus elabina. The koyach of Chachma. Sorry, this is actually a mistake. It should be the other way around. The koyach of Chachma, I believe I messed it up as I wrote it out. Maybe not. Either way, the etzem of Chachma is histavkusa el keser, the way Chachma cleaves to keser. So the etzem of Chachma is shayach to keser. It's mistabik to keser. V'chin kabbalasa, and it's being makabel, the ayin of keser. And then there's the way that Chachma is mispashet el abina. And so usually our ordinary concept of Chachma is actually the chutzenius of Chachma. The usual way that we think about Chachma as Reish Sagiloi, as the beginning of Bina, that's the hispashtus of Chachma. But the etzem of Chachma is the ayin, is the way it's makavel from Bina. And another word to just bring out, to bring to a conclusion this sugya of Chachma, Fiza Muvan, Asher bechinas ha'ayin the chokhmah she'me'ayin temotza, shu atzmai ayin, kanal. Chokhmah itself is ayin. Right? Again, that emphasis, the chokhmah itself is ayin. Is aderech hamoitze mitzia. It's like when you find a lost object. Shu oisei achiv mamash nevad. What you lost is what you found. It's the same object exactly. And so when chokhmah is found from the ayin of Keseh, it's the same ayin. It's the ayin of Keseh mamash. Chokhmah is the ayin of Keseh mamash. It's just the way it comes. The ayin of Keseh is neskala in Seder Shtalshel. In other words, this is not a gilui of the ordinary kind that we usually think about. The gilui, the Eibishter, the way the Eibishter is neskala lefi the gedorim of Seder Shtalshel. This is the gilui of lamayla me Seder Shtalshel. It's the gilui of Keseh in Seder Shtalshel. That's what chokhmah is. But Gama Yusei ayin hu gam ken aderech hamitzia she'ena yedeh mimi o me'ayin hiba. Ken kol mahos the chokhmah hu bechinas ayin kazeh. Okay, so we'll leave this sugya aside for now. And anyone who wants to know more about the new concept of chokhmah, or the eimuk of chokhmah, the way it's explained by the Ramarash, should go and learn Hemshech Chacham themselves. And it's they'll have a no in Masheina Yochel Lahanis, Masheina Nitzin Lahanis. They'll have a no from that also. Okay, so now to move on to another dogma. So here, just to make a sikkim of what I want to bring out here, is you see how the Chosav Yater of the Reb Marash, like Rav Shmuel Zalmanov said in his article in Kovus Lubavitch, there's what to Sefaran Avos Sudingen sich. There's what to debate, there's what to look into, there's what to be ma'ayin, and to look and see which pieces of the Maimar are taken from existing Maimorim or from Tanya or elsewhere, and which pieces are added, or how he's crafting together, how he's shaping and giving new Oisius and new Havana to the Musagim relative to how they are in the earlier sources. And now to go to Gimel, I'll give another dogma of the kind of sharfa Lashonas, how in a very short piece, in a few short sentences, you have Geluyim, you have ideas that really change the whole way you think about everything, which you have to really work hard to wrap your mind around. And the Rebbe Marash doesn't wait around. He doesn't explain the barichas like you would find in the Rebbe Rashad's one, where he goes melakala lakavod, first explaining a one oifan and then another oifan, each one very barichas, until you come to the highest inyanim. Here, within the matter of a page or two, the Rebbe Marash throws in a whole new Havana in the yachas between our asiyas hamitzvahs, lamata, our avodah, what we do down here, we do a mitzvah down here, and what the yachas of that is to the Simson Rishon, which usually you would think the Simson Rishon is the beginning of חידש Shtalshus, it's very far removed from us. What kind of a shaykh does it have to our avodah down here? It's only the premise, it's only in order that there should be olamas and so on, like it's explained in so many places. In order that olamas should exist, there had to be a Simson. And in that whole way of thinking, Simson comes first, it's the beginning of everything, and our avodah comes at the end. But here, we see the Rebbe Marash turns this whole concept upside down and doesn't even wait around to explain how this works, what it means. He just gives it to us. Okay, so let's read inside. So this is also from Hemshech V'Kachas, from earlier on in the Hemshech Yidal L'Nois Tetzvav. Be'emes, Kol haratzon the Torah mitzvahs harizeh b'chinas simtzum. The whole ratzon that the Eibishter has, that the Eibishter desires that there should be Torah and there should be mitzvahs, is an inyan of simtzum. It's a contraction, it's jump, it's a leap. The Eibishter has to go beyond himself, has to be mesamtzim himself, has to clear away the gili of himself. Shari misad atmin sein himself, baruch hu, ein shayach klal haratzon the Torah mitzvahs klal. Misad the essence of the Eibishter, of the in itself, it's not possible that the Eibishter should have a ratzon for Torah mitzvahs. Bavorn, there's a whole sikha, the Rabbi Rashab, famous sikha in Torah Shalom, that kol ha-mitzvahs misyachsim al atzmos. So obviously every mitzvah has a shaykhs to atzmos mamash, every mitzvah comes from atzmos mamash. We're not going to get into what exactly how to be metavach these two things, but we should just know that every mitzvah is atzmos mamash, misyachs to the atzmos mamash. But in Havana, the Eibush is doch bligvo, and that he should want, that he should put on tefillin dafka, he should want, there should be Shabbos dafka, kosher food. This is an in of Hagbala, and that he should want b'chal, that he should be interested in Ma'aseh Adam, that he should be worried about what a person does. This seems to be something which, if you're bligvo, it's totally beyond. It has no shaykh. So there needs to be an in of simsum. As is in Havana. And from a purely rational perspective, you need to have a simsum in order that the Eibush should have a shaykhus to Torah mitzvahs. What does it matter if shit is in this way or in that way? The whole inyan of mitzvahs is only given in order to refine the creations. In other words, the way the Medrash is saying it is kilo, as if to say that the mitzvahs don't really matter. So chas v'shalom to say, but at least in inyan, and from a rational perspective, the mitzvahs themselves don't matter so much to the Eibush themselves. What matters is that people should become more refined by doing the mitzvahs. The Rebbe Marash has a whole hemshach, where he explains the inyan of some. The Rebbe Rashab characterized it as more a musadika hemshach, where he explains the inyan of siraf, of refining the brias ba'arichos. The nimtza חידש ונעשה רציני שהאיס ממשיך את חינוך הניסוף של המים וחינוך הראש שיהיה להיות יסבור רצון בתורה mitzvahs. So when we say that we make the Eibush Ratzon, na'aseh ratzoni, the Pashut Pshat is we do the Eibush Ratzon. But the way the Rebbe Marash is teaching it here is that when you do a mitzvah, you're making the Eibush to have the Ratzon. We make the Ratzon the Eibush, we draw from the Ein Sof that the Eibush, the way is transcending any Ratzon prati, that he should have a Ratzon b'Torah mitzvahs, we draw him forth that the Eibush should have that Ratzon. So, Adarach with a person, you're ma'ir a person who doesn't desire something, you're ma'ir him that he should have such a desire. So when we do the mitzvahs, that itself makes the Eibush desire the mitzvahs. The nimsa, in other words, it's our asiyah, our action down here, which draws the Eibush to forth that he should taka want. He should have a ratzon that in a primistic way that he should have, that he should be invested in our maisa. חידש ונעשה רציני שהאיס ממשיך את חינוך הניסוף של המים וחינוך הראש שיהיה לא יספור רצון תורה מיtzvahs. הידי שהאיסן, הידי זה גם נחסוך לפון ויספור שמעתי ויסרו ולעשות ונעשה רציני. חידש שנרש הניסוף של המים ורצון שיהיה בחינוך תורה mitzvahs. And so this is how he's teaching. Shanas Ratzoni is that when we do the mitzvahs, we create the Ratzon. And then, so this is, Torah here is in Ois Yudalet, which is already a very radical notion to say that the way it is that mitzvahs are for us. But when we, not for the Eibush and stuff doesn't care, it's just to refine us. But when we do the mitzvah, that causes such a nachas ruach, it causes such pleasure for the Eibush that now he taka wants, now he taka desires. We draw from that the etzem of the Eibush in itself, which is in Gatan Hech from any Ratzon Prati, should have a Ratzon Prati. So this is already a very radical way of thinking. But then he goes even further. Anything that forces a second thing to happen, you have to say that the cause is more powerful than the effect. It is the person who's causing, or the thing that's causing, the second thing to happen, and therefore it must be stronger. You're forcing something which otherwise would not have happened by itself. You're making it happen. Beside its own tava, beside its own ratzon, it wouldn't do it. This thing wouldn't happen. The second entity, the second person, the second thing wouldn't be affected, wouldn't act. And so therefore, the one who's causing it must be stronger than it. This is all the more so if you're creating something entirely new. It's not just that you are making somebody who already exists act in a certain way, but when you create something, with your power, you are actually bringing something new into existence. So it's very easy to understand that the one who's creating the thing is going to be stronger than the thing that he creates. Accordingly, it's understood the koyach, the power of doing a mitzvah in the physical world specifically. In addition to the fact that Maisa Gadol, through the force, the compelling force of your action, of you doing a mitzvah down here, you cause the Simtzum Rishon. You cause the original Simtzum. The Simtzum Rishon is caused by you doing a mitzvah down here. She is Simtzum and self-loved b'pratis haratzenas to Torah mitzvahs. You're causing that the Eibishter should be misamtzum himself to come into the specific ratzenas of Torah mitzvahs. So here we have a vort, it's a paradig of vort. And that's it. It doesn't elaborate much more. What this means, how this can happen. The whole Seder Staush is now being turned on its head. The way we're able to think is you have a Simtzum, and then there's Atzilus, and the Tacht and Mamish is Elam HaZeh, and after the Simtzum, after everything exists already, we do a mitzvah. But here, the whole idea of time and the whole idea of creation, everything is now flipped upside down, turned around. We have to start thinking in a whole new way about how Seder Shtashus really works. The center of everything, the beginning of everything, is now us. Is a Yid doing a mitzvah. When a Yid does a mitzvah, that's Poel Simtzum Rishon. That's Poel the beginning of the whole Seder Shtashus. Okay. So here you have an example of called the Melchachila Riba, the way the Rabbi Marash doesn't go Menakal Lakaved. He doesn't first explain in the easier Eifan. Even in what he says, he doesn't make it easy for you to understand. He just Melchachila Riba. He gives you the inyan with its full power, with its full strength. It blows your mind, and he moves on. Okay. So now, to conclude, we'll give two additional examples of Chidushim with Rab Marash, Legabe, the Chassidus that came before him. And this is more in the sugyas and in the general cook of Chassidus, a sudden shift in emphasis. B'chal, we should pavon that almost everything that we find in Chassidus, you can already find in the Alter Rebbe's Mamorim, at least Bekitzer. And the Shinuyim and the Chidushim that we find in the later in the later Rabbeim has a lot to do with the way they explain the Alter Rebbe, number one, the signon, the way in which they explain it, the way that they put the Mamorim of the Alter Rebbe together, the way they relate one idea to another, and also in Hadgasha. So this inyan, the first thing that we're going to look at over here, Dalad, Metzias Ha'olam is in a Dimyan. This is actually, the Alter Rebbe says this actually in one place in Torah, that he says the Lashon that when we say that the world is Kala, it's Kala with a Kaf Adimyan. Doesn't mean that the world doesn't exist. It's as if it doesn't exist. And in that Gufa, there are many ways to understand. There's Yichud Elah, Yichud Tata. But B'derech Klal, when you learn the Alter Rebbe's Mamorim, the Havana is, or at least when you learn B'shitchias in a superficial manner, you could get the impression that the worlds don't exist. Ein el Movade, there's nothing except for the Eibishter. So that means that the worlds don't exist. Now, this is, that's and there's a toss. And in many places, in very few places, the Alter Rebbe says clearly the worlds do exist. The Samach Tzedek says it clearly also. And in all the other places where the Mashmos is that the worlds don't exist, if you learn good the Inyan, you learn the Hemshech Inyanim, you learn the Maimar, the whole Maimar, you'll see that that's not really the Pshat. And then you Yachad the Mashal, the way the Eibishter is in a notion that the items don't exist. How do you affirm the Inyan of Yachid? Is dafka by saying Shema Yisrael Havai Lekin Havai Echad Lamata. It's the Inyan of Yachid that the worlds don't exist. Is dafka through the kiyum of the mitzvah and Olam Hazeh of saying Shema and of being meyachad Eibishter Lamata. So obviously the world does exist. Just to give a dogma, but all these inyanim, you learn good inyanim of Yechudei Allah, Yechud Tata. These are all ways of explaining how the Olamas themselves are a lakus, or the way the Kol are a lakus, or how relative to the fullness of the Eibishter, the Einsaf of the Eibishter says if they don't exist. It's never to say that they actually don't exist. Only later, the Rabbi Rashab, Rabbi Yosef speaks about this in a letter which was printed in Haras Aburim from Morristown, and later it's in the new volume of Sefer Erechim as well. That Rabbi Yosef speaks about this. I think the last two volumes of Sefer Erechim actually. Rabbi Yosef speaks about this. In the Rabbi Rashab, you have an expression that the worlds don't exist. We'll leave that aside for now. It's a separate sugya. But the Pashtus in Yonim, in the Alter Rebbe, is that the worlds taka do exist. But what I want to bring out over here is that the Hadgasha is on Bittul Olamus. The Hadgasha is on Achdus Hashem, and on explaining how the real, how really the Eibishter is the only thing that really exists, and so in a way you could say that the Havana in the Alter Rebbe, or the Hadgasha in the Alter Rebbe, is that for the person who's learning the Alter Rebbe's Mamorim, the Alter Rebbe assumes that Olamus are b'pshitas, and Alakus is b'schachas. So, in other words, everyone knows the world exists. I see the world exists. I feel that the world exists. I walk into a wall, it hurts. No one needs to prove to me that the world exists. What you need to prove to me is that Hashem Echad. That's what you need to prove to me, that the Eibishter is the only true thing. That the Eibishter, everything is kolel in the Eibishter. That everything is bottled to the Eibishter. That is something that needs to be explained to me. And all the Alter Rebbe's Mamorim, as the Mitzvah Rebbe says in the Hakdama to Imre Bina, I think, the Mitzvah Rebbe says that all the Alter Rebbe's Mamorim for 30 years, Midishas b'Shabbat, every week, the Alter Rebbe wanted to fix Yichud Havaya, Yichud Hashem, in the hearts and minds of the Chassidim. And so therefore the Hadgasha in the Alter Rebbe's Mamorim and in the Samach Tzedek's Mamorim, and also B'derech Klal the Mitzvah Rebbe's Mamorim, is on Bittul Olamus, on Achdus Hashem. But in the Rebbe Maharash's Mamorim, we find a new emphasis, and this already begins in the earliest Mamorim, from the year Tafresh Chavav, which these Mamorim are actually from the last year of the Rebbe, the Samach Tzedek's lifetime. So already before the Histalkus of the Samach Tzedek, the Rebbe Maharash was writing Mamorim, and already there we find the Yesoid and the Hadgasha, that the Metzias HaOlamus is ein adimyan, that the Olamus are real. The Olamus really do exist. They're not a mirage. They're not just an imagination, or the lashon is sometimes they're not an achizat zeinayim. It's not a trick. It's not an optical illusion. The worlds are not an optical illusion. They really do exist. And this nakuda is a nakuda which the Rebbe Maharash was madgish in a new way, to a greater degree. This Maimar Micha, he said 12, 13, 14 times over the course of his Nasias. He said this Maimar, elaborating it more, adding more sentences with a different Divrei HaMaschal, but this Nakoda explaining what it means that the Eibishter is the only Metzias Amiti, the Eibishter is the only true existence, but that does not mean that the worlds are not in existence. They're not a true existence, but they are an existence. And this is something that he explains and comes back to and explains again, and with more beer and more arichas, and he gives a chshivas to Olam Hazeh, to the Metzias of Olam Hazeh, which didn't exist before, or which, if it did exist, not to say that it didn't exist, but it wasn't mudgush, it wasn't emphasized in the same way before. And this creates the yisoid for the Rebbe Rashab to put an even greater hadgasha on the idea of dirib tachtonim, the whole Samach Vav. For example, just to put this in perspective, in Tanya, we have one perek that talks about Dirab Tachtena, which is Perek Lamed Vav. But Samach Vav, the whole Samach Vav is about Dirab Tachtena. And you could say in a way that the whole Samach Vav is a elaboration, Sai of Perek Lamed Vav Tanya, and of the חידש of the Reb Marash, that Olamus and Olam Hazeh, Hagashmi especially, has Chshivas. And just to add, what we saw in the previous source in part 3, where we explained the idea that the Yachas of Asiyas HaMitzvah to Tzimtzum, and there too we see this Hadgasha that Olam Hazeh and Maisa and Olam Hazeh is at the center, is the beginning of everything, right? So you see again this nakoda of the reality of existence and the power of the reality of the existence of Olam Hazeh and the power of the existence of Olam Hazeh. Let's read inside now, source 8 from Micha Moicha Tofish Chavav, just to bring out one nakoda about this maimar. The Dibra Mascha Micha Moicha already kind of hints at the main point, and that is usually we're used to using the lashon Ein Movade. There's nothing else except for the Eibishter, which implies that nothing else exists. But the lashon Micha Moicha suggests who is like you. Who is like you is a question which assumes that there are things that exist besides for the Eibishter, but we're saying that none of them are like the Eibishter. Right? So this already has a different mashmos compared to the regular expression that we used in Chassidus of Ein Movade. We must say that now the world does exist as a real substantive thing. The proof. So now you could say that by the time the Reb Marash came along, the Rabbeim had already achieved that Olamus were already not so b'pshitas anymore. Faket, Elakus was b'pshitas, and now we came to a stage where you have to prove that the Olamus exist. Aleph loikat chayav, echad loikat chayav, echad loikat pater. The Mishnah Sanhedrin says 2 people do a certain ma'aseh, the loikat kashuin. No need to get into the details of what they did exactly. But one does this ma'aseh and is chayav, the other one does it and is pater. Ha'isa ma'aseh chayav, the one who actually changes something is chayav, because we say that he did kishuf, that the ma'aseh was a ma'aseh kishuf. But the one who only made an optical illusion is pater, because he didn't do any kishuf. If we will say that the fact that the world appears to exist is a falsehood, as it says in Torah, so here you see that the Reb Marash is conscious that in Torah, in many, many places, and in other Maimorim, he says specifically which Maimar he's referring to, whether there's a lashon that this lashon, Mashenera ha'olam leyesh v'davar zeu sheker. I think the lashon is zeu sheker gomor. The fact that the world exists is a falsehood, and we find such lashonos in the Alter Ezra Maimorim. But the Reb Marash is countering that. Is saying no, we shouldn't understand that kupshutai. If we would say that kupshutai, that the world doesn't exist, then why should we say that the one who did an action or actually changed something through the Maisa, through his Kishov, is chayav, that he did a real Maisa Kishov? He's actually not doing anything. The whole world doesn't exist. If the whole world is an achizas einayim, the whole world is just an optical illusion, so it doesn't make a difference whether you did an optical illusion, a magic trick of an optical illusion, or if you did real kishuf. Both of them is just an optical illusion. If you're going to say that also that his punishment is death, this death is also just an illusion. He never existed to begin with, so his death is also nothing real. And so the whole idea of reward and punishment is empty of any significance. It really doesn't mean anything. The whole Torah mitzvah is put in question if you say that the Olamas don't really exist. You have to say that the fact that the world exists, appears to exist, is true. Zo king, as is this. The world is taken in existence. It's only because if the mokar, which creates them from nothing, if that would be Niskala, they would become batal. They would entirely become a face, they would become spatal. Therefore, also now that they actually do exist, it's as if they don't exist. Okay, so it's very important over here is the kala, it's as if. Okay. And just to bring out again, we're not going to go any further in Michael, just to bring out again, this is not a חידש in fact. In other words, this Havana that the world exists is true for the Alter Rebbe as well, but it wasn't that you didn't find this Hadgasha. And fakir, the Hadgasha was on the Bittul Eilam, on the Yichud, on Achz Hashem, and we didn't need to explain the world exists because everyone understood that the world exists. But in the Rebbe Marash Mamon, we find a new Hadgasha that exists in the world, and of the power and the importance and significance of our Maisa in Eilam Hazim. Okay, now finally, and here I only have one very small quote, even though this is a very big sugya. This is the חידש of the Rebbe Marash that that after the Simpson there was left a trace, a Rishima from Ein Sof, a trace of the Ein Sof Shofnei Simpson. And the way we understand this trace is that it's the Hagbala, or the Koyach Hagvol, which was kolal in the Ein Sof Shofnei Simpson. The Eibishter, who's bligvol, who has no limitation, that includes that he has the capacity to limit himself. And after the symptom, when the oir is there's a silica oir, the oir is removed, the giloi of the Eibush is removed, the giloi of oir itself is removed. What remains is something that was kolal previously in oir itself, which is the capacity of the Eibushter to be magbal himself, which is a chiluk of oir itself shofnei symptom gufa. It's not a new thing which is this חידש. It's not that there's now a new thing called Kalem, there's a new thing called Gvul, which didn't exist before. The Eibush is B'chadish Gvul. No, the Eibush always had the Koyach HaGvul. And Tzimtzum is Megala Koyach HaGvul. And this Koyach HaGvul that becomes apparent through Tzimtzum, the Rebbe Marash says, Tzimtzum doesn't affect it. Tzimtzum doesn't touch it. In other words, any Giloi, so just to bring out the significance of this word in Havana, for a minute before we look at the Lashon of the Rebbe Marash, every Giloi in Seder Shtalshus that comes Achra Tzimtzum, whether it's Chochma of Atzilos, whether it's Bina, whether it's Ak, whether it's a Giloi in Bria, any Giloi of Elikos that's in Olamas is at least the way we usually understand, it's a new kind of Giloi. Why is it a new kind of Giloi? It's a new kind of Giloi that didn't exist b'fnei Simtzum. Because b'fnei Simtzum, there was no Hagbala. There was no Hagbala to the Giloi. The Giloi of the Eibush b'fnei Simtzum was in a manner of pshitas, total simplicity without any boundary, without any definition. Whereas any Giloi that's going to be revealed in the Mokam HaCholal, that's going to be revealed in Olamas, in Seder Shtalshus, is going to have a certain definition. It's going to have a certain Hagbala. It's going to be in that Olam, Lefi Erech that Olam. It's going to be in some kind of Eifon of Tfisa that we can grasp what it is. And that means that it has a Hagbala. And such Giloi didn't exist b'fnei Simtzum. The capacity for such Giloi existed, but that kind of Giloi itself didn't exist. It's a new kind of Giloi. It's the Giloi HaKav. And the Giloi HaKav is mediated by Simtzum. Every Giloi that comes in Seder Shtalshus comes through the barrier of Simtzum. It comes through the Hagbala that's imposed by Simtzum. But the Hagbala Gufa, the Oisis Rishima, the Kalem, that Hagbala Gufa has nothing to do with Simtzum. That existed, the Koyach to be Magbel. The Koyach to be Magbel existed l'fnei Simtzum, and is the Skala Achra Simtzum, the way it is l'fnei Simtzum. So Simtzum doesn't have any effect on the Hagbala Gufa. It only has an effect on the Oir, on the Gilei Oir. The Gilei Oyer is mugbal by the Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum affects the Oyer, prevents the Oyer from being fully expressed in its full pshitus, in its full infinitude, in its full ein softness, so to say. But the Hagbala Gufa is not affected by Tzimtzum. The Hagbala Gufa is the koyach hagvul of the Eibishter himself, the way he is the Fnei Tzimtzum. That's in a Nakuda. That's the vote of the Rabbi Marash, and this maybe more than anything else is taka חידש of the Rabbi Marash Alein. We don't find such a lashon before the Rabbi Marash that the Oisis Rishima Leinoga by Masimsim. We find it in a few mamurim with the Rabbi Marash, very bekitza. Usually just a line or two with no arichas habir. But the Sheresh Hadvarim comes from a maimar of the Alter Rebbe, which is printed in Torah, Hein Am Echad, which is in Parshas Noach of Torah, where there's a Hagah from the Samach Tzedek, a Sarach Ian, about the relationship between the Rishimua and the Kav, the Kalim and the Kav, the Kalim and the Oira Kav. And that's just one line of Sarach Ian, which the Samach Tzedek doesn't elaborate on. Then we find in Mamorim and Oira Torah that the Samach Tzedek answers the Sarach Ian, and that's where we begin to have this vort, a new understanding of the Rishimu, which the Rebbe the Samach Tzedek begins to explain. But we never find such a sharp, clear expression in the Samach Tzedek like we find in the Rebbe Marash. And the one place where the Rebbe Marash does explain this relatively more barichos is in a sefer which was printed after his own histalkos by the sons of the Rebbe Marash, the sons and son-in-law of the Rebbe Marash. The sefer L'Kutei Torah L'Gimel Parshias, and there's a Hagah from the Rebbe Marash in that Maimar Hein Am Echad, which is L'Kutei Torah L'Gimel Parshias. What they did was the Rebbe Marash took the Mamorim from Torah for the first three Parshias of Bereshit, with additional Hagos to the Samach Tzedek, like we find in L'Kutei Torah, hence the name L'Kutei Torah L'Gimel Parshias, and also some additional Hagos of his own. And there we find more of an elaborated biur in this Indian of Oisis Rishima Leinoga by Masimsim. And then in the Rebbe Rashaz Mamorim, we find very often he comes back to this vort again and again. And we should also note that the Rishim Zalman of Koppus, the second Rebbe of Koppus, the son of Maril, the grandson of Samach Tzedek, took issue with this vort, with this Havana of the Rebbe Marash, that Oisis Rishima Leinoga by Masimsim, he was chaylak on the Rebbe Marash in this Inyan, and we're not going to get into the details of the Machlekas now, but we'll just take a quick look at the way this חידש appears in V'kacha, Ois Mem Zayin, and just Lahoyer, this Ois Mem Zayin, we already quoted from above, at the beginning of this page, to explain the Indian of Chachma, to bring out the Maskana about Chachma, that Chachma is itself Ayin, and that it's Mamish, the Ayin of Keser Mamish, is in the same Ois where he explains where he mentions that Oisis Rishima Leinoga by Masimsim, and both of these things are Mamish very, very bekitza. He almost says this vort about Oisis Rishima Leinoga by Masimsim, it's almost by the way, and the Hemshech Inyanim. And again, not to get into all the details and what the connection between Oisis Rishima and Chachma is, but we'll just take a look at this single vort and use this to wrap up the share. Okay, so he says, Hagvul aninsim minut chila, zel b'chinas hakelim de'esfris datzilas. Now this lashon, Hagvul aninsim minut chila, is from the Avodas HaKodesh, which is itself, the Avodas HaKodesh was Remeir Ibn Gabbai, a Makobal, from the 15th century, the 14th century. And he himself is quoting Aliyah Mukabalim. He brings B'Shem Rishonim, Rebbe Israel, Rabbeinu Israel is from the Rishonim HaMakabalim. He's a Rebbe of the Ramban, or a Rebbe of the Ramban's Rebbe. And there, that's where we find originally the word that just like the Eibus says, Bli Gvol, he also has the Koyach HaGvol. And the Gvol HaNitzim Min HaTchila, the first Gvol that is Neskala from the Eibishter, from the Ein Sof of the Eibishter, which includes the capacity of Gvol, the first Gvol is the Kelim of Vesas Firas Datzilas. So the Rebbe Marash is elaborating on this word, and he says, what's the Kelim? The Kelim is Bechinas Ayin HaMegala Bechinas Helim HaGvol HaNitzim Mimenu. The Kelim are Ayin. In other words, they're not a substantive Gilei. They're Heder HaGilei. Kelim are Heder, the Magbal HaGilei. And this Hagbala, this Ayin, this Indian of not being Megala, is Megala the Helim HaGvol. Is Megala the concealed Koyach HaGvol, which is now revealed from the Eibishter. So previously in Ein Sof, the Koyach HaGvol was Behelim, wasn't Nimsa, wasn't in an Eifen of Metzias Nimsa, it was Kolal in the Ein Sof, in the Pshitas of Ein Sof, as a Koyach, as a Yecholas. Yecholas, Koyach Begvol. And the Kelim of Atzilas are now a Megala, this Koyach. The Megala, the Indian that the Eivishter can be Magbal himself, cannot be Megala himself. Shirish HaKelim Heim Me HaReshima. And the Shirish of the Kelim is from the Reshima. Since the Gilei of the Reshima is that which the Simpson didn't touch, the Simpson didn't affect, wasn't mamayit in any way, wasn't magbal in any way. The Reshima is the same Reshima the way it was with Neh Simpson Achra Simpson. It's only that it now came Beskalas. Therefore, also the Kelim of Atzilas are Lukus Mamish. So here he's using the word that Eisis Reshima Lo Yegir B'Hem Simpson to explain as a beer and how the Kelim of Atzilas are Lukus. This is one of the famous problems, one of the famous questions. How can the Kelim of Atzilas, which are the Ingen of Gvol, they have a tzir, how can they be a Lukus? Lukus is Pashut. The Eibus is Pashut, he's Echad. How can you have Hagbala? And here he's giving us a beer since the Sherish of the Kelim are from the Reshima, which is the Koyach Hagbala of the Ein Sof, Shlefnei Simpson. And the Reshima is not touched by the Simpson. In other words, the Reshima is the same Ein Sof, Achra Simpson, the way it is Koyach Simpson. Therefore, the Kelim of Atzilas are Lekos Mamish. And in a way, you could say not just the Lekos Mamish, the more Lekos than the Gilei Oyer Atzilas, because the Gilei Oyer Atzilas is from the Oyer which Hagir by Simpson. It is affected by Simpson. It comes in the Nef Hagbala because it comes through the Hagbala of Simpson, through the Hagbala of the Kelim. But the Kelim Gufa are a Lekos Mamish. Not to say that the Oyer is not a Lekos, but when you take this word to its ultimate Havana, it comes out that the Kelim, in a way, are a deeper expression or a more immediate expression of the Eibishter himself, the way the Eibishter is L'fnei Simpson. Whereas the Oyer of Atzilas is the Gilei of the Eibishter Achra Simpson. And just to wrap up, we should bring out that this idea is also connected to many of the ideas that we expressed in the previous sections, namely the Hadgosha, that the Metzias of Eilamus is real. This is brought out in a deeper way once we understand that the Kelim, the Hagbala, is itself Elokos. Certainly the Hagbala of the Kelim of Atzilas is Elokos Mamish. But that also becomes the ground and he continues to say that's the Xidesh, and this actually here in Bekacha, he continues to say that's the Xidesh of the Gvul, of the Kalim of Olam Hazeh, is the Kalim of Atzilus. So there's a connection here between the Havana that Eisir Hashem L'Noga B'Matzimtzum and the notion that the Metzias of Olam Hazeh is a real Metzias, the Hadgasha that it's a real Metzias, and more so that it has more power. Right, like we saw in source 7, in section Gimel, in source 7, that the Goyim Machriach Hashini Shiyasa, that since our Asiya in Olam Hazeh causes that the Eibusha should come, that the Ein Sof should come into Ratzon, that shows that the Maisa HaMitzvahs is actually more powerful than the Ein Sof, so to say. That aligns very well with this notion that the Hagbala, the Gvul, the Kalim, is from the Eisius Harishima, which lay Noga by Masimsum, which lay Agia by Asimsum. In other words, it's more in itself. It's more in itself in a way than the Gilead in itself and Atzilus or Bechal than any Gilead. Because so and with that we can just come back to the beginning to bring out the main points from this share, and that will conclude. We see over here another example of Ma'at HaKamas v'Rava Echos, that just in a short line, the Rebbe Marash says a word that Lehigia by Masimtsum, Lehigia by Asimtsum, and this is it's Rav HaEchos, it's a word which is of tremendous significance, and it's a tremendously deep word, which the Rebbe Rashab would explain at great length in his Mamorim and in his Haram Sheichem, really all through his life, including in Dayan Beis. And we should be zeicha that through learning the Torah of the Reb Marash, we should bring the Gilui of Rav HaEchos, the Gilui of Bli Gvul, into the Hagbala. We should have a Gilui of Bli Gvul in Hagbala, just like the Reb Marash was able to achieve in his Mamorim, with Bias Machshiach Sekeno, Meher B'Yameinu, Amen. Just look at the chat to see if there's any questions. Okay, so the only question is about the handout. The handout is on the website on igoodyeshiva.com.org. And you'll be able to find it there. Shkoyach. Thank you everyone for listening.